Hi, welcome to the Cozy Kernel Den. I'm your host, Cozy Kernel, and today we're gonna make my first episode, which we're gonna cover the topic of trauma. So, what is trauma? So I really think that trauma, there's a lot of misconception and misinformation. So, because for me, this is a topic that I have a lot of personal experience with for my own personal life, and also for things I've seen and witnessed around me. Because I think that subject doesn't get touched upon properly by many people in the medical field that say they know what they're speaking about. But I would honestly argue that they're those kinds of people are not wrong. It's just that they're saying things that come from a textbook. Many people that speak on subjects and different subjects of certain studies, they will speak from a textbook angle and less from experience. And experience always beats a textbook. Someone that's experienced certain types of traumas, and also before I get too much in the details of what we're going to speak about here, I want to say that the word trauma, I think people associate that mainly with trauma from war, trauma from rape, trauma from war, and concussions, like in sports, for like football, for example. But I would argue that trauma is much more. It can be much more subtle, and it basically impacts your whole physiology and and basically your physical organism. And so if we allow ourselves to go into this topic and see exactly what trauma really is, I think a lot of people can actually have a better angle to tackle different challenges they might have in their lives, and that they might not have fully connected the dots, and maybe that with my video there's something that will click. Because I know when I was younger, I would search different subjects, and I never really found anything very compelling. And so I decided to find out for myself, uh, everything that I'm going to speak about here. So, if we can touch upon a first few points, such as the one that's good that we're going to speak about right here, which is okay, yeah. So before we speak about trauma, I think a lot of people don't understand what their body really is, because to know and to feel that you have trauma, first of all, you have to be aware of your body. That's like one of the first steps. But as we know it, or at least as some people are informed about in society, the body is not really treated. It's not really treated with the intelligence that it's that it should be recognized at. I think a lot of people in the culture of, I don't want to generalize, but maybe Western society, which I live in America, so that's maybe accurate to say some people here do that. Maybe a lot. I don't know. I just know from my own experience and the people I witnessed. And so I would say that the body is treated as if it's something you just carry around in your day, but you're not aware of it. So it's almost like you have this thing that you carry around, this bag of meat, but you don't know you have it. You don't know how to listen to it. And so because of that, I think a lot of things people never looked at, they just get shoved under the rug because they don't know how to listen to the signals they receive. And so over the years, they just got a body that's there, but it lost its sensitivity and reception that you're supposed to have to it. And that's going to connect to a point later where we speak about addictions, coping mechanisms, habits, and patterns and what have you, because once you're disconnected, that's when you're going to jump in those kinds of things, because you're going to go on something that's called autopilot. But let's backtrack to where we're at right now and just continue. Oh yeah, so the first point is just saying that the body in society, I think, is just treated like it's not intelligent, and that it's it's something that you just get along with, but you never really understand what it is. Like the most simplest way to say is you don't understand you have instincts. Because in society, we don't really need instincts because everything is already in front of you. It's very comfortable. It's very easy to access. So you say most people just go to work, they go home, they go buy food at the grocery store. Everything is already ready. So already everything is in front of them, and because of that, it's not very useful for. It's not very useful to have those capacities to be in tune with your instincts, because in this modern world it's not that useful, but it actually is, depending on what you want to do with your life. I mean, depending on the level of life you want to have, because I think the main the most common life the most common life modern society offers is really just a life of numbness, and not really tapping into what life can be if you want it to feel more rich than what you've been told it is. All right. So another important aspect that I just want to mention here is that I think trauma kind of roots when you're younger, like in your childhood, and some can be very major, to the point that you're just gonna deny it. You're gonna repress it, suppress it, and because of that, you're gonna grow up based on certain factors, and then you're just gonna wonder why things are not clicking for you in certain aspects. Maybe in relationships, maybe in finances, maybe with your health, and that's also another thing of society. Society is the very is a kind of, the societal person is the person that's gonna do things and not understand why they do them, but if they question them, they would kind of wonder, like, why am I doing this? Is this helpful for me or not? And that's why it's the word unconscious can be interpreted as you want, but just it just means that you're doing something, but you're not aware of you doing it, and oftentimes it's actually not useful for you to do it. So it's a habit that you picked up, and then you just repeat it, and you forget why you're doing it in the first place. And that leads to addictions sometimes. And addictions is not just drugs; it can be many, many things. So yeah, so we covered that it can start in childhood. That's kind of very known in the trauma aware communities and whatnot, but that's just like the first pillar of what we're going to touch. Also, I would like to mention that I would argue that a lot of people might not be aware of it, but they might live in a kind of state that's called fight or flight. That's just like a word for like the state where your body is in a stress response, and because it's in a stress response, it tends to use the body tends to use it tends to use the it tends to overuse the energy that it has to basically survive usually, or to create things depending on what you're doing with your body. But if you're in that kind of stress response state constantly because of whatever you're dealing with, then what's going to happen is that that stress response is going to affect everything in your life. So you might be rushing through your day. You wake up and you don't take time for yourself. You don't take time to breathe, and because of that, you're not aware. You're just moving like a headless chicken. That's the best way to say it. And because of that, you don't even know you're doing it, but you're already in that state of rush. Because if you're in a state of rush, it's chemically addictive. And because of that, you're just gonna repeat it. You're just gonna do the same thing over and over and over again. You go to work, you drive in your car, there might be traffic, and you might not say it out loud, but you're just gonna complain in your head, oh, gotta get there, gotta get there. Maybe that's more like older generations of people who do that, because nowadays kids of my age or younger, they might be more at ease. I don't know, but maybe that's just like an old thing that some people actually do find ways to complain here and there. And you're fine if you want to complain in your life, you're allowed to. But if you want to have a life where you understand how to do things that are useful for yourself, and whatever is not useful, you stop doing it because you just see you waste energy there and you could put it somewhere else. So if you see that, then keep watching, because this video might be useful for you. Okay. So next, the second point is the culture of trauma. I've seen a lot of people that embody certain cultures, like I'm mentioning in the point, like where in that particular culture, trauma is at the root of it. And the very best example that I can express about this, because I've personally been through that phase in my life where I would listen to hip hop music a lot. And there's nothing wrong with listening to hip hop music. It's just that there's a culture of people who grew up in poverty in certain environments where there's already a tension of first the poverty, and then sometimes there's crimes and whatnot. And because of that, the music is like the reinforcer in um, that person's headspace. And because of that, they're just gonna create like an identity around who they see themselves as. And if you would see these people, the ones, for example, in this example, who call themselves like gangsters and whatnot, a lot of them, I would argue they're very good people. But if the way they carry themselves, I would just say that it's just that, like, for me, trauma is something that in the rap culture, in the hip hop culture, is something that people are gonna walk around like a badge of honor. I swear that's really what it is, and it's mistaken for strength, but really it's not, because it's wearing your scars, what you've been through, on so much on the edge that whenever someone tickles with you, you can take it take it the wrong way, because you never like found peace inside of those things, so you're kind of like living in a reactive state. And so I think that's kind of what that culture pushes, like the rap, because a lot of rap music, they speak of fighting, killing. They portray women as a certain way, and like again, you can listen to that stuff, but it's just like it's a different frequency that you can tune into. But at the end of the day, first of all, it's not really rooted in truth, because no one can say that living in pure violence all the time is actually sustainable. But that culture is kind of like that. And also, that culture also is linked to addictions, because people in that culture, they will take drugs and all that stuff, because that's also part of the fun of the culture, right? So that's that. Then, in the same fashion of the culture of trauma, I would say that there's the autopilot life. Believe it or not, there's actually people who are on autopilot, meaning that their days are like routines, and they're also they're so systematically the same that over time the person becomes so dull and numb that they have to chase certain things that will make them feel like they're alive, but really they're not. If they would take the time to stop or just look at maybe there's something better for me. But then again, some people are really defeated and they're not able to see that. But what I would argue to say that the autopilot life is a very common thing where you'd wake up, you get up the same way, you do the same things, see the same people, go at the same place to work, go back home, eat, watch the same stuff, and then sleep. And then you wake up, do it again. So that's kind of the hog. What do you call that? Anyways, there's a movie that's like the person repeats the same day every day. Anyway, the day of the marmot. That's like the French word marmot, but I don't know the word about it, the word that it's called. But anyway, that's basically the life. You just repeat everything over and over in a cycle, and there's no change. So that's what the definition of insanity is. That's what it's called. Oh yeah, and when you're really entrenched in what I call trauma, is that a lot of time who you take yourself to be, since it's kind of a survival mechanism of your body, you're gonna take yourself as you are, as who you really are. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, if someone's gonna ask you like who you are, and you're just gonna say like, I don't know, I work, I go to work, I have kids, but like if you give that answer to anyone, they're gonna say it's normal. But I would argue to say it's not truly normal, because how could it be normal that you say that these things, that's what you are? That's not what you are. You can't be your job. You can't be like, that's what you do in your life, but there's something that precedes all those things, your essence, right? But that's why I say survival, because when you live in survival, you're you're really narrowed down in your focus. So whatever is you're doing, you really think that's all there is. And in a certain perspective, that's kind of true. But also, it's possible to also step back and see that there's other things. That's why I think so. In life, most of us are not trained to like see all that's possible, because otherwise we would have more genies, and instead what most people are trained to do is just do what everyone else is doing. They don't want to risk. They don't want to go to that path that's more unknown, less predictable, more things you got to figure out on your own. That's not as popular. And yeah, when you live in that survival mode as who you think yourself to be, it's gonna kill your creativity, and your presence. You're always gonna be focused on what else you gotta do, where you have to be. That's survival. And that's the funny thing. Society doesn't question, because it doesn't understand that even if we live in 2025, a very modern era, people think that our brains have changed from thousands of years ago when we didn't have any resources. But that's the thing, we evolved, but at the same time, we're very primitive in a certain sense. So if you don't find a way to fulfill those primitive, raw raw needs, you're just going to live in what we call autopilot, which means you're on the default mode network of your brain and body and whatever word you want to use, your system. And because of that, your way of seeing the world would be very automatic, but it's survival based. You just never see it because you're in it. But once you just tap into your own rawness, you're able to see that it's not like you're not living with the rages of people like that are surviving on default mode network. It's not that. It's just that you see a broader perspective, and you see that these things are real, and instead of just automatically like basing, like, I don't know, your social judgment on that person, because the person on autopilot will not be aware that they're doing it, but because you're primitive, thousands of years ago, you would have to kind of make an assessment of every person to see like if they would be part of your tribe, or were they someone that were gonna attack you. And so you had to scan your environment for these kinds of things. But now in society, people people don't know why they're doing that. That's why I say society is like they do a bunch of things, but they don't know why. They don't know why. So people are gonna go to parties, and you're gonna hear the girls say, "Oh, I don't know why this girl was. I don't know. I don't like how she said this and that in that way with her gestures." But what she's really saying is that that person's gestures that she's referring to, it was a primal thing that she just hasn't learned to pick up on that signal. But even though she lives in society like every one of us, the only advantage to actually see it is you actually understand that it's is the way that person, like her vibe. That's what I can say. You see the vibe of people, and you can say like, okay, that person, I wouldn't want to talk to them because they feel creepy or something like that. And that's when I say that when you step out of default mode network, you just see like more like vibe or energy and the way things feel, instead of just automatically doing it. And that's the difference. It's not that big. It's kind of subtle, but it's kind of like a small advantage because you don't just react here and there and don't know why you're doing it. So that's the point for that. All right. Okay. Now, since I mentioned a lot of times like addictions and coping mechanisms and patterns and habits, one moment. Okay. So, in an addiction, like I mentioned earlier, I think people have the idea that an addiction is only like drugs. But I would say that it's much more than that. Addictions can very be easily like overworking. And also in the culture we live in, overworking is really praised. Like if you work a lot and you're a provider for your family, that's in the social status game, you're seen as very valued. But then again, that's very superficial, but that's still a thing. But that's an addiction in a way because you're compensating for something or escaping something to put your attention somewhere else. So it's deviating from just what is and what you are, and that should be enough. And then everything should be unfolding outside of that. But addictions make it that you chase something out there because you're not fulfilled, you're not whole in your body, you're not whole in yourself. So you have to go outwards to fill the void, to fill what the emptiness you feel inside of you. That's not. Oh, another common one would be food, overeating. Um, you can be addicted to certain emotions because like your body, if you have a certain thought, a certain image in your head, in your mind, in your head, and then a feeling is going to be created from the emotions you feel, and then that can be a vicious circle of feeling certain emotions. Sometimes it's good because you can feel like love because you're thinking of your partner, and then that's good. But also maybe something difficult happened and you just repeat it, you mentally rehearse this, and then that's another addiction. But again, it's not like the same as a drug, but it's still an addiction. Sorry. And then um, other toxic patterns could just be in relationships. You just step into relationships where you repeat a certain cycle, which unironically, certain patterns that that you have in your adulthood and your relationships, it's often stemming from like childhood. Certain things you picked up from your parents, their dynamic in your family, and how that often repeats when you grow older. Because the first impression you have of the world is your parents. Because before you're 6, you just absorb everything, and then you make your view of on life based on their own. So if they were surviving or if they were having undealt stuff, it might have been the lens that you're wearing now, and you might not see it. So that's another thing to consider. Also, from my own discovery and direct experience, I've seen a lot of systems that what they do for the addicts, they try to manage their addictions instead of healing them. The first example I'll give, if you go to those places where I don't know how it's called, but not a drug house, but just like a place, a kind of refuge where people can just go there, and sometimes they can sleep or just stay there for a few hours and maybe eat or whatnot. They have those yellow drug disposable containers, and people are able to put their drugs in there. So when I see that, that tells me directly that that the systems that make those buildings are not even touching the root at all. They're just making a place so people can conveniently go drug themselves in a safe environment. In a way, that's better than someone just going in the street doing it. But at the same time, it would be more useful if people wanted to find the root and just stop it there. But then again, the systems are not really made to find the answers, because if the systems went to the root, first of all, the medical pharma wouldn't really be as lucrative. It would kind of go to the downfall, because everything can be solved in nature. But in society, we just want the medical treatments. We just want the quick fix, the patch hit. Yeah. Or another one that the systems create is the the therapy sessions, right? You go to therapy, you talk to a therapist, maybe for an hour, once a week, once a month. And then the plan for that is to go for a few years and then hope that you're gonna feel better in a few years. And you're not gonna get those years back. And you're probably gonna spend some money if you go private instead of public. So, honestly, that's just what I'm not saying, but I'm saying by saying this is that you can't rely on the system at all. Like, not for your health, that's for sure. Oh, and if we go to like the coping, the coping like That's also another vicious cycle, because it reinforces the identity. It's so subtle. Like, you have to like try to backtrack in your own life to see that, because if you take medications, then there's a likeliness that you're gonna say like, oh, I'm sick, I gotta get better. And then I don't know, if you're a little overweight and you know you could train and feel better, if that's your goal, but you put it off, you just say, oh, I'm lazy. That becomes that becomes like a new identity you make for yourself. You're lazy. You're just basically using a word to justify not doing the action. But if you say, I'm hungry, I want chips, you're gonna go grab the chips. So it's just a fucking word. You're just using the word to justify yourself not doing something, and then you make yourself think that's who you are. But really, the best person you can lie is yourself. So that's that. Okay. Another topic that's also related to trauma, because if you look at trauma, if you look at the root cause of trauma, or just root, if you look at the word root, the root of your body is your sexual glands, right? It's your sexual parts. And so I would argue to say that a lot of people in society are just told, maybe not aware of it, but like shame sexual needs, or shame their sexualities, just in the sense that you don't it's not like, I don't know, I just feel like we're not trained to just like walk around hard. If you're a man, your sexual part hard, walking around just like, I own my I own my thing. But of course, that's like what you naturally do, and like, if you're in a healthy state of mind and healthy body, you just walk around like that. But that's not what you see, right? You don't see like men or women just like walking around like with that natural confidence, like not the performance one, just the real one that comes from owning your sexuality. And then that comes to the point that I say, like, a lot of people perform their gender. This is so true. Like, how would you have to speak and go talk to a girl if you were rooted and like you were already magnetic? Because a man that's rooted in his sexuality is already magnetic. So if you have to go talk to a if you have to go talk to a girl and like just do all this act and this posing and posture around her because you want like to get her attention, that already tells me you're doing a performance. And you're allowed to. It's nothing wrong. It's just that I'm just saying, like, it's almost going backwards from nature. That's what I'm saying. And that doesn't mean you have trauma. Not necessarily. That's just like, that could be, but the reason I'm bringing sexuality in the trauma topic that I'm speaking about here is because, to me, society puts trauma on society puts trauma on sexuality, because if you look at religion, there's a lot of baggage we've been transmitted to like shame it, deny it, and guilt trip us into like. Of course, no one goes thinking, "Oh, I'm not gonna have sex before marriage." That's like too basic to even bring this topic. That's not what I'm speaking about here. It's just a culture of guilt and denial, because if you go back to the point in the beginning where we speak that like people walk around with their bodies not aware that they have one, to me that sounds like a denial in some sense. Because if you knew that you had to take care of that body, if you knew that, then you wouldn't deny it. And that doesn't mean that you're religious. That doesn't mean that. It doesn't. But again, it could just be on your unconscious baggage that you carry on, but you never took the time to observe, like, why are you doing it, right? Because our bodies are so tuned to emotions, you might not be aware that you're having this guilt. You say, "Oh, I'm sorry," or you say something without realizing why you're saying it or doing it, but that might be connected to it. That would be good to investigate. So I did forget to make a disclaimer in this video. I'm not like a healthcare practitioner or anything, but I did mention that I'm speaking from my own experience and from what I've learned and from what I've seen around. So it's just to be taken as informational, and also because it's on the Cozy Kernel podcast, it can be it can be eaten with popcorn and just for entertainment. It's whatever you choose. But at the same time, there's also value in it if you ever went through anything. And also, I'm going to cover like topics at the end for practical things you can do to just get more in tune with yourself, because I think anyone wants to get the most out of life and no one wants to stay stuck. It's just that when you are, it's easier because you see what you could have to do just to like get yourself out of the rut. But there's always a solution. And sometimes our minds will just make us think that you have to like run a marathon or something. You don't have to do complicated things. Really not. Also, I would like to say I have nothing against religion. Uh, I would just like to say, like, sometimes things like religion are not supposed, to me at least, they're not supposed to be taken like literally. If you read the Bible and you just read the Bible literally, you're not gonna get the point, because the Bible wasn't created for you to read the point. It was created so you could read behind the lines, the deeper meaning. So it's so another thing in society is society is gonna go literal. Is gonna think in literal terms when they're supposed to think deeper and just like not the literal meaning of what's being said, but what's being said behind it. And when what's being said behind, they're gonna be literal about it. So they're never gonna figure it out unless like unless they find a way to train themselves. Which I have some things that I cover like could help. I hope so. I mean, not that I hope so, but I mean, anyone who's at least a little bit serious of just like understanding a little bit, then continue watching. Oh, and just the last point of religion, like even in religion, you can listen to like music about religion. That doesn't make you religious, but it's the way it feels, right? You just listen to it, and it just makes you like surrender to what's being said, and I think that's a really good thing as well. So there's nothing wrong with religion. It's just like the old dogmatic approaches that they've given us like a long time ago that might still be running in your own system. That's might be like what's slowing you down or something. And then we continue in the belief systems. The same pillar we've been talking about, sexuality and religion, is the new age movement, right? We all heard of like the ideas like the new age spirituality movements where they say like you are a god, or that you are God, which which a lot of people, they fall into that kind of trap because I think when you think you're God, is like you think you're like creating everything in a way, and I think it's like really surface to think that, because I would say it's much more subtle, because religion is gonna say that um, wait a second, I just want to make sure I don't say something faulty here. I was just gonna say like you're a person that causes effects. You're not a victim of your circumstances, right? But that doesn't make you a god either, or God for that instance. That just means that you're a pattern receiving machine, and you can find causes like, why am I doing this? Why am I here? Why am I at this point in my life? And you're gonna see something cause it that you probably don't know about, or you do but you want to ignore, and then you can start moving forward so you don't experience that kind of life anymore. So the word God, I think, is irrelevant. So that's the new age spirituality trap that a lot of people like want to believe themselves as a god or whatever. But yeah. Okay, another pitfall, because I really like, I'm going into the depths here, is that a lot of people like will have the identity paradox, right? They think that they will say like, if trauma needs a self or you to exist, then the path to healing that self assumes that a self exists to begin with. Right? So that's gonna be like the bypassing. You're just gonna say, well, there is no me, because in spirituality, that's what you learn, right? You learn to like relax and unclench from your own thoughts, and then you're like, well, if there's no me, there's no self, there's no trauma, there's no healing. But that's only bypassing if you haven't figured that out for yourself. If you're still stuck doing the same thing that don't work, then you're just lying to yourself. You have to figure that out before you can say that. Otherwise, you're just a parrot. You're just saying what everyone's saying because it sounds right. Because you're in that spiritual lingo, mumbo jumbo stuff, and you just want to repeat what everyone's saying. But in a sense, it's true. That's what's like ironic. That's why things in life you can't take too seriously, because everything's can be real and not real depending on how you look at it. But the point I was making with this is like, the reality of things, even though technically you're not your body, you're not the self, you still have to take care of it. Otherwise, it's not gonna treat you right. If you hate your body, you trash it, you don't respect it, then there's gonna be consequences. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But fast forward when you're like 95 years old, you're gonna be on a wheelchair. Maybe you have like an oxygen tank with you. Then you're gonna remember this point. So yeah, you're not your body, but at the same time, treat it right. So don't make that mistake either. Next, we're going to speak about integration and legacy. This is the part where I speak about like all those things that trauma causes. There's always something you can do. It's not like a how-to. I'm not telling you sit in this stance and do 5 push-ups. That's not the route I'm going to take, because that's a mechanical answer for someone looking for something mechanical to do. That's the thing like that we're going to be prescribed in society, right? You're going to be told like, oh well, I'm sick, I have to do that to get better, whatever. But that's just gonna make you like an automaton, and we don't want that. So all I'm gonna say is practices that actually don't feel mechanical, that exist, they do. First one is developing spatial awareness, right? So that's something that's the easiest way to do is like unplug from your senses and just close your eyes and just focus on the space around your body. So when you just close your eyes, just focus on the space around your body, because you're sensing like the black space around you, and then you just focus around you on how does that feel when there's that space around you, like, and start inhabiting that space. Because people that walk around. They often walk around like there's no space, but there actually is. There's like a field around you. There's like a field around you that if you're disconnected for like reason like trauma or whatever, it just makes it that you're shrinked out and you're surviving because you don't understand there's space around you, there's breath, there's things, that's information, there's ideas. Like when you're receptive, you have to be when you have that spatial awareness, you become receptive to things that can make you, give you creative ideas, for example. That's just one thing. So spatial awareness, you focus on the space around your body. There's also like those terms they call interoception or proprioception, which you can develop also. I'm not going to go into them, but that's also like valuable tools. Because if you can have a very sharp perception of things and a very mathematical approach, then you can see like how you can start uncoding patterns in your own life and how causes happen, and how to be a few steps before they happen, so you don't like fall victim to your own life. So that's the reason there's like the integration part that I'm seeing here, because there are things you can actually do for yourself to get untangled for whatever you're in, right? There's always something. Yeah. So anyone that's like still listening, you're just gonna see that this path is maybe not easy, not popular, but at the same time, someone that is interested in this stuff is usually like someone they call like a cycle breaker, right? You might have experienced some kind of things, which is going to bring me to the point of why I'm even talking about this. Like, how is this related to me, right? But I will get into that. Because when you're a cycle breaker, it means that you have to have experienced things for yourself to see why there's even a reason to bother with this stuff, right? And for myself, the reason I do this is because I want to get myself to a better life. I want to get myself to a time in my life where I have kids. And when I have kids, they don't experience what I didn't get. And there's something in me that wants to give them what I didn't get. And that was presence. For me, that was presence. Because I had two parents. I live in a comfortable house, everything. But the main thing that was missing for me was presence. Because you can have two people that are there, but that aren't there. I don't know if that makes sense, but to me it does. It's like growing up in a house and you kind of realize it feels like you're living with ghosts. Because I was very perceptive as a kid, right? I would sense things of how things that were not being said, that were being shoved under the rug, and because of that, that's what it led me to conclude. And that's why I said denial in the beginning of trauma. Because people who live in denial, that means they're denying the reality of what they're living. They're living a lie. They're not admitting. They wouldn't, because otherwise their whole lives would fall apart. All they stand on would fall apart. Like quicksand. That's the word for that. Because to not live in denial and look at what you've been, like what made you you, that would mean you have to go to your roots. You have to go to like whatever feels uncomfortable. It does. Because that means you can't blame anyone. That means you're responsible. Not just responsible, like you have to go to work and pay the bills. That's not real responsibility. That's just surviving. That's not real responsibility. Is taking accountability for how you feel, how you impact other people around you, and all those things. That's like maturity, responsibility for your own life. Okay, so the reason I was trying to say, like, why am I speaking on what is trauma in the beginning in the first place, is because although I did not survive a war trauma, or a rape trauma, or a concussion, because I did play football, but that's not the point. The main trauma for me was more like certain wounds that would manifest as like abandonment and neglect and denial, also because I was denied my own reality. I would say certain things to my parents, and this is not an attack, this is not um to say anything against, because I would always love them, but it's not about that. It's just about saying what's true. So anyone that's been through something similar, they don't feel like that they're weird for thinking it, right? Because for so many years, I tried to justify certain things that I would think, like, am I crazy for thinking that? Like, and back then when I was thinking that, like, of my own story, how I I grew up, I would think like maybe that's normal. But then I come to question more recently, like, no, this can't be. That's not normal. But then again, before I was surviving, so I couldn't admit it to myself that was just the truth, but it was. Denial would be, as a kid, is to the kid is gonna say something that happened, and the parent is just gonna say that's not true, or they're just gonna make you feel, they're just gonna nag you for saying it, and they're just gonna pretend like you're a problem, when in fact you're just stating what's out there. You're just stating the truth. Because one thing I would often do when I was younger is I would like unconsciously get on my dad's nerves, because something in me would just sense that he was, I don't know, like hiding himself from himself, and I would just like annoy him, and it would get him mad, but then he would get mad at me. And that's the funny thing about the adults, a lot of adults, is they don't understand when you're an adult and you have kids and you get mad at them. Most of the time it's because you don't understand they're a mirror, because kids, they absorb, they just mirror whatever presence is the strongest, and it's their parents. But the parents gonna, some parents who, I would say, not to be disrespectful, but they are not mature emotionally, they will just aim at the kids and say you're a problem. And sure, the kid might be a dick sometime, but at the same time, I would argue to say that most parents, they just like completely ignored. They like jump from kid to adult. They bought the adult script. Look, now I'm an adult. I work. I'm gonna retire one day, and they forgot they were a kid. So when they have kids, they don't know how to handle a kid. They try to control the kid. Try to tell them go to school, blah blah blah. Do all this crap. All right. So back before we got cut off, I was saying a kid, before it starts to grow up, it's in a very creative state. It's in a very free state. But then it's gonna have parents, right? Because they have to have caretakers. They're not just gonna get thrown to the lions, which in a sense could be smarter. Could be smarter, honestly, to look at it from nature's perspective. Because the parent the parents, once they have kids, they're gonna start thinking, this kid is mine. This kid, I made this kid, which kind of is true, but at the same time, the kid came out of your womb. The sperm came out of your dick. You're not the owner in sense of property, but in society's terms, everything you have, you touch, it's yours, it's yours, it's mine. Mine, mine, mine. I control this. And that's the problem. You can't control nature. You can't control a force of nature. And because of that, we're going to send the kid to school. We're going to tell him, study this, cram his brains, and then I don't want to get too off topic from like the main reason here. We're speaking about trauma, but I'm just trying to sum this up like to quickly end this, but the general point of this topic about parents is just that they're not taught what exactly it is to be a parent. And so because of that, they live in a lie. They live in the lie that they have to be parents. They have to be good parents. They have to tell the kids what to do, what not to do. And that's not a life. That's just a prison. You're not living if you're getting told what to do. Go play outside. And then the kid goes play outside. That's literally getting told what to do your whole life. And of course, if you, for my personal example, I wouldn't like do whatever I wanted, even though at a certain point I had that phase, like I just rebelled, did what I want. But why I mentioned trauma, sorry, I want to get backtrack. Why I mentioned trauma in the first place for me is because the part where I would like feel abandoned because I didn't like, there wasn't like an emotional placeholder for me. And I don't want to generalize, but I mean, I'm sure a lot of people that's maybe their thing, but even if that's true, it doesn't make it a good thing, or it doesn't make a healthy thing or a normal thing. But for me, it was like kind of major. Like I would certain times need advice. And even though I had a dad in my house, he would say like things like, pretend we're not here. If you're a child or a teenager and you hear pretend we're not here, that just means you're on your own, figure it out. We're not there for you, really. That's kind of just like how it is, right? And why I say that's traumatic is because as a kid, you're not supposed to figure it out. You're supposed to have someone that's able to like give you certain guidelines so you succeed, like not just in school, not just in money. That's just one thing. If you have money but you're not like satisfied emotionally, you're not stable mentally, then you're just gonna crumble even you have money one day. So that's why I'm saying trauma for me, because I didn't have those pillars that most kids already have. Like they have the baselines, but since I'm not blaming my parents, because my parents, they grew up with very like no kind of role models themselves. My mom didn't have like a mother she could count on when she was young, because my grandmother was sick, and so because of that, she had to build from whatever she could. And my dad, he had many dads, so he never really knew his own dad, so he didn't have like that stability. So he, in a sense, he performed the idea of what a dad is, and because of that, that's what I received. So I understand the bigger picture, not blaming, but at the same time saying that's what felt traumatic for me. It doesn't mean it's the biggest trauma or that I'm playing a certain card. I'm just saying that for me, it felt a certain trauma as a kid, and I think it's something we're able to talk about and just like see what we can do. And the solution is very simple: is to become your own free agent. That means like you're not counting on people to like give you advice. You figure it out for yourself, right? That means if you don't have the structure a lot of people have to make it in life, you make it for yourself. And when you start making it for yourself, you build that foundation. Then you have emotional stability, you have mental strength, physical strength, and then at that point you have everything you need to succeed. And the more you build on that, for me it's the gym, or I meditate. Those kinds of things I do every day, but almost every day. And that really helps me build myself. So that's why I feel like, in a certain sense, it's a good thing, because instead of having to count on external validation or external outputs to find my answers, I looked inside myself and I found everything. And so because of that, I think that was my road, right? That was like, I was meant to be in that family and see that I have to count on myself to figure it out, and I did. And my life is only getting better day by day because I do the steps, right? That solo time, because when I was alone, I didn't go to my dad like, "Oh, dad, this guy beat me up at school. I don't know what to do." I was in my head. I was thinking about it by myself because I didn't find them. I didn't find my father like comfortable to talk about those things. He wasn't like the. He wasn't a father figure to me. He was just there, and we would talk. He would bring me to vacations with my family. We would sometimes have dinner conversation, the father son time. But that was more of a luxury for me, right? We didn't have that very often because he would spend his time on the computer working to work and make money and whatnot. But at the same time, I would call it like an absent father in a sense, because he was more busy doing his computer stuff and not like focus on me. And when you're a kid, you want to have fun, you want to make memories with your family, especially your dad, because that's a very important bond. If you don't have that bond, when you grow up, you can't like talk to your dad and just call him like, "Dad, remember when we were doing that?" And that brings up like a very good memory. Though I could call him and say a certain memory, but at the same time, it's not as rich as if he was actually that kind of person. So I'm not gaslighting myself into thinking he was something he was not. But at the same time, I'm saying that uh, it can also be difficult for someone who doesn't have that, right? Most people, they just grow up around a very uh, normal parent environment, and so the other traumas that are not spoken about here, but they do exist, is like trauma like about scarcity. Like, you grew up in poverty. Because you grew up in poverty, like your whole life, it feels like you're surviving. You have to like make sure you have your money and that stuff. And even if you live in a comfortable, you call that in society, I think it's a normal, like general income living or whatever, like the middle class, right? Even those people, I would argue, because that was my family, is it was like kind of middle class, right? I would argue that that kind of living is still survival based. It just means that there people in that style of life, they're comfortable enough to be able to say, "I'm not surviving," but really they're still surviving because they're still depending on something to make their own money. They're not independent, right? So to me, that's the path: to be so independent that you don't depend on any system to make your riches. And that's how you stop living in survival and you start thriving in life. But that's gonna be for another video, because that's something like I want to start touching upon, like the ways you can start like being more elite about life. Like, if you want to make it, how to make your resources work for you, how to make the decisions that's gonna carry you forward. If you've been failing in certain aspects like relationships, romance, finances, your passions, your crafts, anything, there's always a way. And it's not like do this, do that, but there's a way, there's an approach, there's a perspective, there's a lens, there's always something that you can look into and just find a different way to approach it. And is how you're gonna that is like gonna solve like those questions you have. So for now, that's just like the video on trauma. What was trauma? So uh I didn't get too personal about it, even though I explained a little bit like why I would speak about this, because like, I did say how my own environment impacted me. Of course, I didn't go into the whole details, but I know myself enough to say that there's a good reason why I'm speaking about this. And so if ever um this is interesting to you and we like more about this, you can always maybe make a mention or something, and I can go more in details. But I already spoke for like an hour, so uh, I'm gonna go catch my breath, and maybe I'll see you in the next. All right.